Hey, what's going on, everyone? So in this video, this will probably be one of the most interesting topics I will be discussing. I suppose if you actually know me in person, if you were a friend of mine, you would know that I'm extremely blunt. My friends like to say that I have no shame, and I guess generally I'm just a very open person. I really will share everything with you. When it comes to just about any topic, I'm not going to be afraid to talk about it. So this particular topic has been very interesting for me. If you read the blog post that's below this video, or maybe you're already on the blog, maybe you're listening on a podcast, I'll try to kind of detail this, well, not detail too much, but, talk a little bit about this subject without actually, I guess, what am I really trying to say? I guess really to put it out there, here's where it all comes down to it. Every guy pretty much watches porn, or they have watched porn at some point in their life. Most guys also jerk off. They masturbate, they watch porn, and that's what they do. That's kind of always been the way I've looked at things. Now, what I've noticed the last year or so, actually, before I even dive into what's going on now, let me sort of back up and talk about how this all came about. I mean, really the kind of phase for most men is you hit puberty, you figure out what your Johnson does, and then you start using it. You start jerking off. You discover porn. I pretty much grew up being really entertained by the idea of finding a Playboy or finding a Hustler. It wasn't like 15 years ago. I'm 29. I'm almost 30, and 15 years ago, when this was all kind of going on in my system, there wasn't websites where you could just go type in YouPorn and start watching these hour-long videos, and they were all at your fingertips, and it was really easy to get a hold of. It was this treasured, prized possession. I actually remember going to a friend's house. The first time I ever saw a porno, he had an older cousin, and they had stacks of VHS tapes that the cousin ended up pulling one of them out and just putting it on casually while we were all hanging out in my friend's room. And it was I remember sort of being mystified by it, not in a good way. I was sort of scared and almost oh my God, is that really what happens? And I even remember a moment in my life when I had actually believed my parents just didn't have sex, that was just not possible. Maybe they somehow had me a different way. And I remember one of my neighbors telling me, "Oh, that's just how it happens." And it was very interesting to kind of go through that phase. And I even remember having a friend that was just the same friend who had this cousin. He was a little more, I guess you could say, sort of like a early bloomer. He was more involved in the sort of porn stuff than I was, and he had more ready access to these kinds of things and was being exposed to it a lot sooner than any other friends that I had. So he actually had a ton of magazines, and one of my other friends said, "Hey, I really want a photo." And he was used to looking at Playboy, where they're very they're just naked. It's not even really porn. He ended up getting me this picture from Hustler, and the girl's basically ready to go, and he almost was disgusted by it. He couldn't it was too graphic for him, for this woman to just be a little more she was ready for sex. She's ready to go, whereas in Playboy they're kind of just posing. It's not really the same. I guess I can't really describe it without getting too detailed, but hopefully you get what I'm saying. If you've looked at either of those magazines, there's a pretty big difference. So what I wanted to kind of chat about, what I thought was really funny, is going through high school. I actually remember one of the kids, I don't know who it was, someone had an account with Hustler, and they shared a password around, and 6 or 7 of us all had access to this. And we would always joke around because there was this one porn where a girl actually she was the babysitter or something, and the father brings her home, and then of course it turns into a sex scene where they start having sex on her car, and the father, quote unquote, had his name was Mr. G. They didn't actually say his full name. She would just say Mr. G. So the girl would be constantly moaning things "Oh, Mr. G." And I remember us actually all joking about this. Like, we would all be in like the next few days, we're all back in school after we've all had access to these videos, and we would all joke around about the Mr. G video. Like, all of us are watching it, like, totally normal, totally fine. And that's kind of like how I've grown up. I guess it's always been like a very normal thing to be watching porn. I'd say back around that same time was when I started actually collecting porn videos and like storing them on my computer. And it's kind of weird to think, but all this time goes by, and now there's things like torrents and other ways where you can just go on with these websites and start downloading it. And before I knew it, I mean, I had this collection of probably like over 100 gigabytes of porn. I mean, I basically had, so I have a ton of hard drive space just from doing other things, like whatever, like having video games and stuff. But I found that I had this massive porn collection, and I never felt like deleting it because I had all this space. I never felt any reason to. I guess as of a year and a half ago, I finally moved out on my own. Finally ended up in a real sort of serious long-term relationship. I've been with my girlfriend about a year and a half, and she's never been very fond of this stuff. I mean, she basically despises porn. Now, I've been with women that would be all about it. Like, they'd probably watch it with you, but it all depends on the girl. Like, she's very sort of insecure about it, doesn't really, she kind of looks at it like, if I watch porn, then in her eyes it's almost like I'm cheating, or like I'm actually watching it because I'm more interested in seeing other women naked, whatever it is, which really isn't the case. It's more of, for me, it's always kind of been, you're just getting this release, it's like you just want to, maybe you're bored. I mean, I don't know, like, the kind of consensus is, when you really think about it, is why do people watch porn, or why do people do this stuff? I guess if you're having sex and you're doing all these other things, unless you're making a child, you're probably doing it just because it feels good and you want to release some tension, whatever the hell the case is. I mean, that's really what it is. People don't like say it for what it is, but I've never been big on these whole, like, I know there's websites out there that are totally against porn, like these other websites that talk about how it's an addiction, and it's just this like curse to your mind. Like, they talk about like it's a drug. And for as long as I can remember, I mean, I would always just do it fairly casually. Maybe for me it'd be like 4 or 5 times a week, never more than once a day. And generally, while I'm dating a girl, it's reduced quite a bit. But what I've actually noticed since, I kind of stuck up with the same pattern, even while dating Brenda, my current girlfriend, and I would find that, on a night, say I come home and I'm home at 3, I get home very early because I work a very early schedule, and, I'm sitting there at the computer, there's nobody home. Of course, what a perfect time to sit back and, so I will basically find that she'll come home, and of course, like, if she wants to have sex, like, I basically just relieve myself. I have no desire to have sex. So it's almost like terrible that this sort of cycle would continue, but I've been so accustomed to like watching it for so many years and just continuing with it that I never really looked at it like a problem. I guess in a sense I don't really want to say that it is a problem, because I've never felt like it necessarily interfered so much with anything that I was doing with any women that it needed to be like addressed as this big issue. I know going around online as of the past couple of years, like, they have these communities like on Reddit and all these other places where they call them like they have termed masturbation as fappening or fapping, and they will create these communities where people will be like, I haven't fapped in blah 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 X amount of days, and they like make this big thing about it. And as far as I can remember, the biggest benefit I had when I actually stopped doing it for a set amount of time was when I went to college. I was basically commuting for a majority of my 2 years. I went for an associate's degree, and one semester I decided to live on campus. And when I did that, I actually decided to myself, I was basically bunkmates with, or roommates, whatever you want to call it, with 3 other guys. We all shared one room, and we all had there were 2 bunk beds. So I mean, it's crammed in there, and you can't exactly be like, you really don't have that much privacy. There's people around almost all the time. One of the roommates, actually, two of the roommates were always out, but one of them was like almost always in, hanging in. Like, we were both very similar. We'd hang out a lot. And the other two guys, like, one of them had a second apartment, so it was almost like stupid that he even was in the room, but, you know, they had a dorm room with us. But yeah, I mean, I remember just sort of ignoring that and not really caring about watching porn or masturbating or anything like that. So when I did that, I actually remember having a lot more confidence with women. I remember feeling kind of more, I guess to put it bluntly, I felt like more of kind of like the asshole that girls are attracted to. Like, most likely my testosterone was higher. I was just in a better mood. I guess, like I said, I probably had more energy, and I think that lasted for whatever the semester was. You know, like, obviously there would be times when I'd probably like let it happen, or if I ended up fooling around with a girl, but that kind of doesn't really, I don't know if it really counted, you know, like when you're with another woman, it's kind of like you get a different sort of feeling when you actually like sleep with them versus actually like pleasuring yourself and just doing it in the comfort of your, you know, office or something. I guess where I'm at with this is like, I ended up earlier this year, Brenda approached me because she was like very concerned that I had all this porn stored on my computer. She told me that she felt like me having the porn was like keeping trophies, like I was keeping these women trophies, which really wasn't the case. It was more just sometimes I like to go back and watch the same stuff. That's just how it is. So I ended up telling her that I was going to delete it, and I didn't delete it that very moment because, in a way, I just wasn't ready to. I wasn't ready to delete 10 years of something that I'd been, like, sort of building. It'd almost be like, I don't want to make it the same way, but, I mean, imagine you had a music collection and it just went away. I mean, you'd be pretty upset. So I ended up moving it, and she actually found it because I didn't exactly hide it all that well. I put it in a folder called Other in a root drive that she happens to be in when she, like, downloads stuff. And she noticed it was there and looked at it and found it after thinking I had already deleted it. So she basically gave me the silent treatment all day long the day she discovered it. And I was kind of like knowing she discovered it, but I didn't want to admit that, oh yeah, crap, like she found that I moved it and now probably thinks I'm lying to her. And I wasn't really trying to lie. I just wasn't ready to let go. You know, it was kind of weird that I was in that mentality. Like, am I really addicted to this stuff? You know, like that's kind of what I was thinking. And as of recently, I basically ended up deleting it right then and there and showed her physically on my hard drive that I just freed up like a retarded amount of hard drive space. So I basically kind of ended up in a still consistent pattern of like continuing to do what I normally do, but obviously just going on like these streaming sites because they're everywhere and it's so easy to get a hold of now. I mean, they don't even like warn you if you're 18 or not. You're just right there ready to go. It's like YouTube. And yeah, I thought with this program it would be a good opportunity to see if it helps improve my overall sex life with my girlfriend, because I think if I'm not going to be watching porn, then I'm going to be in a better mindset. I'm just going to be probably more energetic. I think I'm going to have more desire to have sex with my girlfriend. That's just a given, you know. And then beyond that, I don't know. Like, I'm really curious how it's going to make me sort of react. So it's actually been only a few days because I started this program just on Monday. And when I'm making this video, today's my second day of the program. So I'm really hoping I can kind of push through and stick through this particular part of the program. But you know, if you're kind of thinking that, you know, maybe you're addicted to porn, maybe you watch it too much, or maybe you think it's a problem, like, you know, I think the biggest thing to do that I'm doing myself right now is I'm keeping myself busy. So instead of sitting at the computer and going, oh well, I'm bored, there's no one home, I guess I'm just gonna jerk off. You know, like that's generally what would happen for me. Like, I would be bored. In any other case, I would say the only other time that I might do it is before I go to bed, and that's because it would give me like a very heightened sense of just like relaxation after the fact, and it would make me fall asleep. Now that's something I really have barely or hardly done at all since I've dated my current girlfriend, because, you know, she's basically sleeping next to me. You know, there's like no nights that I'm going to bed without her. You know, like if it was a really, really tough night and, like, you know, she's downstairs, I know she's going to be down there for like 3 hours, then, you know, I'm trying to fall asleep early, I have shit on my mind, I might do this like once, very, very rarely, but I'm also not really like proud of that, you know. So I guess really what it comes down to is, like, I haven't, you know, wanted to admit to myself that maybe I have like a problem with it, and that for me it's always been very normal. But at this point, I'm ready to try something different and try to follow, you know, see what sort of results it brings me when I just stop watching porn for like a whole month. See how that, like, what's that going to do for my mood and everything else. So I guess really that's that. Obviously, it was a very sort of blunt, honest episode. I mean, that's just coming straight from the horse's mouth here. If you want, check out the blog post. I sort of covered a lot of different topics that are very similar. My story here. Yeah, I'll hopefully be reporting back in 30 days with kind of my results and letting everybody know, like, how this actually affected me. Talk to you later.